Everwind is a first-person sandbox adventure set in a world of floating islands, where you build your own flying ship, explore the skies, and slowly work your way upward through the world. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't usually the type of game I play. I never really got into games like Minecraft, so going into this, I wasn't sure if it would stick. But after spending around 10 hours with it, it pulled me in more than I expected. Visually, it's hard not to compare Everwind to Minecraft. That blocky cube-based style is immediately familiar. And while the floating island setting isn't exactly new, the game still managed to hook me pretty quickly. Getting started is simple. Within the first 15 to 20 minutes, you're introduced to the core mechanics, movement, crafting, basic combat, and you're set loose to explore. There is no heavy learning curve here. If you played any kind of crafting or survival style game before, you'll feel right at home. The core loop is straightforward. You move from island to island, exploring what's out there, gathering resources, finding gear, unlocking blueprints, and slowly building yourself up over time. In the first 10 hours, most of the time was spent exploring rather than building. Now, one thing that stood out pretty quickly to me is that progression doesn't feel strictly linear. In different playthroughs, I end up with completely different gear and unlocks, depending on what I found. That randomness actually makes each run feel a bit different. But once you start finding traders, you get more control over what you unlock, which then of course helps to balance that out. Your ship is essentially your moving base. At the start, you're working with a very limited build area, just enough to get your basic setup going. So early on, my ship was basically a floating platform with a balloon and some fans. It worked, but it wasn't exactly pretty. As you upgrade your ship core, you unlock more space to build, along with improvements to speed and altitude. That is when things started opening up a bit more. I did start building something that actually resembled a ship, but coming from someone who isn't used to this kind of building style, shaping things like a proper hull is definitely a challenge. And that's more of a me problem than the game. We all have seen what people can do in games like this. The building system itself works, but there are a few things that took some getting used to. The ghost preview for block placement isn't very clear, so sometimes it's very hard to tell exactly how a piece is going to snap into place, as I cannot see the corners. I ended up placing quite a few blocks in the wrong direction because of that. There is also a lot of variation in building pieces, which is great, but some of them look very similar in the preview, so you might think you're crafting one type of block and it turns out to be a slightly different version. It would be handy if they're actually named. It is something you can learn over time, of course, but early on it can be very confusing. Combat is decent. It works, but it doesn't feel as sharp as it probably could. There is a slight delay between your input and your action, especially when you're trying to block or parry, which makes the timing harder to get right. I never really managed to get parrying down consistently. I mean, it's something you probably can adapt to over time, again, but never quite feels as responsive as you expect it would be. The world itself is actually quite enjoyable to explore. Each island has its own feel, some are calm and peaceful, others are a bit more dangerous. Across the first 10 hours, I came across a mix of different enemies. Animals, humanoid factions, and a few variations in how they fight. But currently at this stage of the game, it feels like you're just playing against tougher and tougher versions of what you already have seen, rather than completely new enemies and new behaviors. Again, remember, I am only 10 hours in. Dungeons weren't something I ran into early on. I only started finding them once I upgraded my ship and reached the higher island. And when I first entered one, I didn't expect much. At first I thought it was just gonna be a small underground area, but it kept going. There was a lot more to it than expected, with enemies, traps, and a mini-boss at the end. I even got caught off guard by a spike trap at one point, which definitely made me pay a bit more attention after that. The rewards were fine, but I was more excited about taking the chest with me than actually what was inside it. As you explore further and higher, you'll start coming across villages with traders. You can sell items, buy blueprints, and get a bit more control over your progression that way. But beyond trading, there isn't much interaction there yet. No quests, no real dialogue systems, at least from what I've seen so far. And I also didn't come across any kind of map system. So right now, exploration feels very forward-driven. You move on to new places rather than returning to old ones. One thing that I didn't really get to fully explore yet is the skill system. By the end of my session, I reached around level 8, so I only had like a limited number of points to spend. There are quite a few different perks and traits available, but at this stage I didn't unlock enough to really see how much they can change your experience. Everwind doesn't try to overwhelm you. It opens up gradually, lets you explore at your own pace, and gives you enough along the way to keep moving forward. There are things that still need refining: the clarity in building, the feel of combat, and how some of the systems are presented. But none of that really pushed me away from the experience, and overall my time with the game was generally better than I expected going in. Because the biggest thing I noticed was, I kept playing. Even after I had the footage I needed, even after I told myself I stop at the next island, I just kept going. And coming from someone who doesn't usually play these kind of games, that probably says more than anything else.